Hi, welcome to Assumptions. This is the podcast where two friends, one who's a Christian, that's me, and one who's an atheist.
That's me.
And we sit down, we try to understand each other better.
That's right.
This is weird.
Yeah, what are you doing the opening for?
I'm doing the opening. I don't know. It's just...
Give me that
you do a better
paperback.
job of it, that's for sure. Your radio voice. But hey, welcome back. We are at our last episode of season 2, which we've been doing for like 5 years now. It
seems like, huh?
Yeah. And this is our second of a 2-part Q&A episode where we are taking questions from our listeners. We have a few more questions to get to.
Probably will not be talking about masturbation in this episode.
Yeah, that was unexpected but fascinating. So I have a question
Just
from...
like masturbation.
Wow.
Anyways, yes, we have a few more questions to go
there
through.
are conservative Christians listening to this podcast.
I know. I apologize.
Okay.
I fall down to my knees. Eyes are raised to the sky.
But here's a question from Dorothy, another one from her.
Mm-hmm.
In regards to our loneliness and singleness and community episode, she says, I think the reason, this is more of a comment she says in the question, but I'm going to throw it in. I think that the reason, this is her talking, I think that the reason we seem to live in a time of loneliness and broken community is that, as you said, we often have to say goodbye, sometimes never to meet again. This is painful. It hurts. But it is real, and the pain is real, and this very fact makes those friendships so valuable, and those feelings remind us how real and important they are. Sadness and missing someone like my mom makes me remember how much I valued her. That said, the problem with social media and cell phones is that they protect us from the pain of saying goodbye, which somehow robs us of our humanity. It also robs us of the gift of real community, by which definition includes those feelings we hope never to have to feel. Does that make sense? I guess that's her question.
That's her question.
So perhaps for Kyle, well, she's not
yes.
looking at, yeah. Yes, it does make sense. It's done. So back to Dorothy's voice here. So perhaps for Kyle, not being good at making friends is in part possibly being afraid of having to perhaps one day say goodbye.
Why does it always make it sound like I'm like the saddest person in the world? You can't make friends. You can't get a relationship.
Hi, folks. Welcome to our podcast, Therapy with Kyle.
Yeah,
where
really. I love this comment a lot because it actually brings a lot of feelings from me.
Sad ones?
Sad ones, mostly. Yeah. No, there's a lot of stuff firing off in my head at once. I have never thought about it this way before, but I think she's touching on something that is very, very true, which is in the vast majority of human history, if we parted ways tomorrow and then didn't see each other again for 3 years, that would be a very real loss at that point, right? Yeah. And then when we met up with each other, we'd have to like reconnect and talk to each other, and that those warm feelings and everything would probably rush back, and it would probably be a more
warm feelings.
Got a lot of endorphins that come out of that meeting then at that point. And I was actually thinking about this when she was writing and you were speaking it. What came to mind was like my grandma, right? If this had happened 400 years ago, my grandma had passed away, there would be a point where I'd be like, man, I don't know if I can remember what my grandma looked like or what she smelled like or what, like those sorts of, like the feelings she gave to me would always be there with me. And I would treasure that a lot and I would want to think about that. Yeah. And the loss would still be very true. But what I wouldn't have as a crutch would be like, I don't have that photo or I don't have the video that we have recorded of her speaking. We wouldn't have all of that ephemera that surrounds us. And I think that in our current culture, what is happening is that we are inundated with so much information and so much stuff that I can still see what you're doing, even if we're not talking on a daily basis. I can still see my VidCon friends and everything that they're doing and recording and creating from afar, and I don't have to wonder what's up with Nick and Chris today. Right?
My grandmother just passed away, and I'm going to her funeral on this next weekend.
Right.
A week from now. So yes,
it's rough.
More poignant than that. But I think what Dorothy's point is, which is true, is that there is something intrinsically human about having to say goodbye for good.
True. Yeah.
And
I think that's what makes
that sense of closure, right? That sense of loss and closure, and that is painful and that is hard. And in our social media era, we don't experience that in as natural way as we could, because we have this feeling of semi-staying in touch, which is can be helpful, but it doesn't create that sense of loss and that sense of sadness, which
is weird because I think that in general, I prefer being able to stay in touch with these people. I really do. But I think she's hitting on something very true, that without having that actual feeling of loss and saying goodbye to people, that there is something that is being taken away from what humans have always had to do. This is going to sound like the worst analogy, like I'm not talking down to people, but it's an incomplete analogy I'm going to make. But we were talking about fandoms here a couple of episodes ago. But in our culture, what I mean by that is like me growing up, right? If I wanted to watch something or experience something, I either had to wait until that time on that day to see that thing, or hopefully we could record it on VHS and maybe I would play it if I could find the right tape, put it in, rewind it, push play, and then watch it. There was a journey to actually get to what we wanted to do.
Right.
Nowadays, whether it's
just pull it up.
We're talking about pornography, we're talking about like the World Series or that favorite movie that we have, I can watch anything I want to watch within 5 seconds. And I can have it in my face and I'm watching it. And I think that mentality and that reality that we have to live in here right now means that we never have to say goodbye to anything because it's always there. I can always access it. It's on my phone. It's in the cloud. It's always available.
And cheapens it.
It cheapens it a little bit when it's not something you have to work for.
And one of the sub-themes that I don't know if I've emphasized strongly if it's come out, but it has been clear in my mind is the sense of loss that comes from proper goodbyes as being a reminder of what makes us human. Right? Like, oh, these things really matter. Like, I need to spend time with this person. Like, this is hard. And then as a Christian, I have the sense that it's not the end, that the community is not broken. And I think of the ending of The Last Battle, for those of you who've read the Narnia books, and how all the characters that you fell in love with, thought the stories, they're back. They're in community in this new Narnia that's created by Aslan after the world ends. And just like that, and then how that kind of, I mean, that can sound very wistful and that can sound very idealistic, but I believe that it is true. And that kind of, I wonder how that sense of loss then, like there's a hope behind that. Whereas now it's like, oh, it's online. Like, I'm going to keep seeing you. It just kind of fades. There's not that strong sense and that poignancy that kind of reminds us like, oh, this is a big deal. I'm not going to see you, probably not going to see you again. And until we meet again.
So I don't know how do we fix that then, or do we want to?
Well, right, with the social media thing. I mean,
I think this is probably part of the reason why a lot of the younger generations are pushing against social media and technology in general. Where it's like they still have it, they still have all the stuff, but it's not.
Are they doing this?
So much consuming their entire lives because I think they're seeing the bad effects of the people that are older than them. I forget what the statistic was. Is like. We're talking about like under not Gen X, but millennials, whatever the younger generation is, younger than millennials, which is still have smartphones, but use them like half as much as what millennials do. So I don't know. I think there's something to that where in the future, we're probably going to see a lot more people being like, hey, I'm taking a week and I'm just stepping away or whatever it happens to be because I cannot be inundated with this all the time.
For me, the answer is more acknowledging the strengths and limitations of it. And so when I say goodbye to friends at work, right, when I leave a job or leave school, recognizing, I guess just acknowledging that, I'm going to see your posts now and then, but that's not the same thing. And so leaving space for there to be like, this is different. And give space rather than kind of covering up, right? Which I think we often, in my experience, we often do that. Like, there aren't as many proper goodbyes because we kind of assume we'll stay in touch on social media, which we don't really. It can be helpful and it's a great gift, but like acknowledge that it's not the same thing and have that time to grieve that.
Can you make an 8-episode Netflix series for me just to binge on, just so I know what's going on in your life? Then I'll probably watch it.
Would you though? Maybe a half-hour episode. I don't know about 8. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Thanks for those questions, Dorothy.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those were great.
We have a question now from Josh, and he sent us this message. He said, where does Kyle even begin to root his morality?
Where does Kyle get off?
It's not
what's he doing?
Let's finish the question and then, then you can tear into it if you want to, or treat him like a devoted listener to the show, which he is. He listens, and he listens. Josh tells me that he listens with his friends
Does he have listening parties?
Yeah, well, no, he has a friend that listens to it, and they both talk about it after, which is cool. Which is really cool.
You should make a wiki page for us.
Or both send us questions next time. Anyway, This is Josh's question. I would like to ask where Kyle even begins to root his morality. How can one be morally outraged over anything if morality is subjective and not rooted in an objective standard?
So there's a lot of things going on in this question, and it's going to sound like a wishy-washy answer. There's no way around this. Sure. I kind of bristle a little bit at the idea that this is kind of the argument I see a lot of time with Christians or religious folks towards atheists. It was like, well, if you have no morality, why aren't you just killing people? Which I believe you even asked in an episode one time. And I just feel like that is the default state. Like that is how badly you think of humanity, that without a set of guidelines that we're just out murdering people. I just feel like that's intellectually dishonest to think
about human nature.
About human nature specifically, that our default state is to kill people. That's just what we all want to do secretly, and the only reason you're not is because God has told you not to. I feel like that's a bad way to view humanity. That's point one. That's point number one. However, to answer the real question that he asked, which is where do I root my morality from
without an objective standard?
This is where I'm going to say that where the wishy-washiness comes into, and it's just that there's this kind of idea that's been proliferated by people like Will Wheaton and other media luminaries out there, which is like the number one thing that should govern humanity is just a very quick thing, which is don't be a dick, right? Which is it's like,
I love how our
pretty reductive
of language has just gone downhill.
Apparently these episodes are just like swear it up. Which I know is very, very reductive, but it really does inform my worldview as somebody who grew up, as I shared here a few episodes ago, of always feeling like I was being yelled at and chastised, and I always wanted to be like someone who was doing good. I think that does have an overarching way that I view humanity is like we should be treating people nicely. Like there is that golden rule, which is a Christian ideal, which is like do unto others what you would have them do unto you, right? Like you should treat people fairly. You should treat people with respect. And that is all creeds, colors, genders, that sort of thing. So that is always what has...
But where does that come from? Like what is that?
Yeah, my upbringing, I guess, is what was instilled into me at a young age, and viewing just as an outside viewer, seeing what happens when people treat each other nicely versus what happens when people treat each other not nicely.
Okay. So it's a cause and effect kind of thing?
Yeah, because I mean, as someone who's a very new entrepreneur, I have been so bowled over by people who I haven't talked to for years and months coming out and helping support me. Or giving me jobs, or recognizing that what I'm doing now is something that they want to help support, sort of thing. And so I was thinking about this actually here a couple of months ago, where it's like, man, it's a good thing that I was nice to everyone when I was in that management role at Chapters, or else I wouldn't have had this job over here. They would not have brought this person over here to help me out.
So it's not a niceness rooted in you're doing it for the right reason. You're doing it even though there's no consequence. You're like, eventually it'll come back and help me.
I think
it's a karma kind of.
Yeah, I think it's that kind of that mentality, that me giving out positivity and being nice to everyone that I come across and giving them the time and hopefully being that, pinnacle of humanity that I want to see in the world, that does have an effect coming back to me at the same time.
So it's a business growth model.
Well, it is.
I'll be nice because later on I'll need help.
Sure. Right. I don't know if I don't want to be like, I think this Josh's question, you hear it a lot, like you said, and I think it can kind of be a little crass in terms of how it's just like a little bit rude sometimes in how it's, but I think there is still like, it is an important objection and it should be treated, because like if you're in a world where, not a world, but if you're in a context where there's no further goal, like you're going to die in the next week, and it's down to brass tacks, and it's down to who's going to die and who's going to starve, or sorry, those are both dying. Who's going to live and who's going to starve? Yeah, there's no more next stage to give me that karma back, right? To help me out. Well, then does that come out of just because you know that person and you want to be nice to that person? Like, I guess that's where And I think
that's where the Christian can have a little bit more, but like, no, I'm going to give myself away. I'm going to pursue justice. I'm going to be the Good Samaritan and give myself to someone else, not because of anything I'm going to get from it, but because my reward is in heaven. Like, and because the Lord, and then that's one way, or the Lord has done this to me. Like, that's the ultimate Christian ethic. It's like, the Lord has stepped into my world and given all of himself to me. My future is secure. I have something to live for after this life because of that, because of what he's done for me. Now I can give myself away and not worry about that. Whereas I don't know if that can be said of the same.
I agree. I think that is a fair comment to have.
Yeah.
And I guess I cannot give a really great answer at this point.
Boom! We got the atheist.
Scared me.
Sorry.
You just peaked really badly on that audio there too. Oh
This
my gosh.
version of Assumptions is done. We have stumped the atheist.
I didn't realize we're going to do jump scares in our episode here today.
I'm sorry.
What I mean to say here, though, is that I don't have a great answer and say, like, I get my morality because of that taco over there. Like, that is what is telling me to be like the best person possible, other than I just have a deep instilled compulsion to be nice to people because I think it's the right thing to do.
Right.
That I don't see the point in stepping over other people when I would not want them to do the same thing to me.
Right. So there's a certain instinctual human nature kind of point to that. I guess the question is like, well, when there's no reason to do that, or like, or there's a very good reason for you to ignore that.
Sure.
Then what happens?
So then what happens? There's been so many experiments that show, like, reveal like what happens when people think that, like, hey, like, it's do or die. I'm probably going to preserve my life over somebody else's in this case. So I agree with that most people are self-preserving first and then they worry about other people.
Like, at that moment of push, like, if your faith gives you a good reason not to do that and a reason to die for others. I mean, you hear stories of that in, like, I mean, I've heard stories. I'm sure for every story of Christians, strong Christian, committed Christians that give themselves selflessly, there's a dozen of times where Christians were jerks. But like, you'll hear stories of in the Holocaust or in prison of war camps where the Christians were the ones that actually had real living faith, were the ones that were selfless and that gave themselves away, because in that push comes to shove moment, their security was somewhere else, and their reason, their identity was in Christ and in what he's done for us, and so and in the world to come. So there's a sense of, well, I can give myself away, I can do whatever you want to me. Yeah, it's just interesting thinking about those things. I think it's more complex, I think, than
it is. I think it's something to delve into a little bit more, maybe in future seasons. I think we can delve into that a lot more if we wanted to. I just feel that while there's not something that is above me that is compelling me to be selfless, that I think that I just believe more in basic human nature than what a lot of other people do.
Sure.
That I think that our default is not to hate each other. Our default is to help each other out.
And some extreme situations that...
Right.
Rather than revealing the default at that point, those are the extreme situations.
Correct.
Okay. Right.
But maybe we can talk to a sociologist and see what they say.
Depending on what evidence they bring to the table. Shout back to our last episode. I think the other thing too I'll just say about this is we're not a debate podcast. And so these kind of questions, I mean, in the Christian world, we have the word apologetics, which is like, how do you defend the faith? And these killer questions. That's not what we do on this show. Like, if they come up as part of what we're talking about, I think definitely bring them in. But we're more looking at things in a little broader lens.
You should look for our spin-off podcast, Accusations, that is coming out here in a couple months. Hi, everyone. Before we go back to myself and Daniel for the very last time this season, I need to say a few things. As always, Assumptions is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. If you haven't gone to the Alberta Podcast Network's website, there are so many great shows to listen to. This week, because I'm a huge narcissist, you should go check out That's a Thing. I was a recent guest on that podcast discussing YouTube conventions. That's a Thing is a really fun show where Karen Unland, the president of the network, has her daughter Elizabeth explain teen culture. Many times it just involves deep dives into memes and internet subcultures that prove that I am now basically Clint Eastwood upset by people looking at my car. You can find it in all the great shows by going to albertapodcastnetwork.com. We also have a couple of sponsors this week. First is ATB. On some of my other podcasts, I've been mentioning ATB Prosper. It's October, which means Halloween is not very far away. And we all know that it can be scary that night. Call me a traditionalist if you need to, but I'm of the belief that my ancient relatives returned from the dead on that night seeking hospitality and respite from the burning fires of the afterlife. I like to leave out some candy corn and watch Hocus Pocus. Anyway, ATB knows that investing shouldn't be scary. Whatever your future holds, ATB Prosper can get you there. It's simple, it's personalized, and it's all manageable through your digital dashboard. Visit atbprosper.com. It's not scary, promise. Our second sponsor this week is another podcast. It's called Otherwise. This was initiated by a group of Edmonton youths who wanted to empower the diverse communities living in Treaty 6 territory. As Daniel and I are about to get to, there is often a disconnect between different groups, and that can fester and grow to be damaging to the culture and to the country. Otherwise, the podcast noticed there was an absence of information in Edmonton between diverse groups. This is a way to bridge that gap. They've assembled a really great group of passionate and knowledgeable people. Everything I want to be when I grow up. I was listening to the first episode earlier today, and I think if you like assumptions, there's a lot to love in Otherwise. Go to otherwiseshow.com to listen to the first episode. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. Thanks everyone for listening. This season was a lot of work, but I'm glad it turned out as well as it did. We cannot wait to start planning season 3. But for now, let's jump into the last bit of Daniel and I's conversation.
All right, we have one more question.
Yeah, this comes from Micah. And he actually did leave a voicemail and actually transcribed it for us, which is very, very nice. Thank you, Micah.
This is fun. Let's listen to it.
Hi, Kyle. Hi, Daniel. My name is Micah. It's good to meet both of you. A friend of mine who's an online acquaintance of Daniel introduced me to the Assumptions podcast when only one episode existed, and I've listened to every single episode, usually the day it gets released. And after 2 seasons, I feel like I know you both, so I'm sorry for not introducing myself sooner. I'm kind of shy about meeting my favorite authors and speakers since I don't want to ruin the illusion of a relationship that I know we don't have. Which brings me to my question. How do you get to a place where you can talk honestly and cordially about worldview assumptions between a Christian and an atheist who work together at, say, hypothetically, an unnamed tech company in Washington state that might be a competitor to the unnamed tech company where you two met? Do you already have an episode planned to tell us the story of the courtship of your bromance with each other? Do your conversations in real life sound the same as your conversations on air? How long did you know each other before you started having this type of open conversation together? Were you both looking for a friendship with a person who's so different from you? How did you guys end up together? And how can others make friendships like yours? Do we need to start a bi-worldview friendship app like Tinder? Or could you help us figure out how to make friends like this in real life? I'm already looking forward to season 3. Good to meet you both. Cheers.
Okay, that was from Micah. So he had a bunch of different questions that he listed off there. So we're going to go through those sequentially and just have a conversation about them. So number 1, which is, how would you recommend a friendship like you to have without scaring people away?
So I'm just reviewing what he said about in the opening bit.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to, thanks for listening so faithfully.
Yeah, no, it's great.
We appreciate that. And it's kind of, it was when I first got this email to our Assumptions account.
First, I thought it was spam.
I smiled. I was just like, I just had it, like, I was kind of high for an hour.
Yeah.
And then I listened to it again coming in today, and I was like smiling all over again. Just like, it's kind of like, it's flattering. Like, wow, this person, like, this is cool. This is cool. So thanks for that. How would you recommend forming a friendship without scaring people away?
I don't know. How would you answer that, Daniel? So this is the thing. And I think this is going to be the thrust of a lot of the different answers I have for these questions, which is, never once have I felt that this friendship that we have is one where I need to convince you of something. I'm not trying to sway you to a different side. I have been much more open to listening and understanding and really wanting to be like, you know what, I had lots of Christian friends growing up, but you're able to articulated in a way that I think makes a lot of sense to me. And while I may not necessarily agree with the reasons behind the way that you come to your decisions, I can still understand and be like, oh, okay, I get it. I understand where you're coming from in this, and that logically makes sense from that worldview. And so, I don't know, I've just been a naturally curious person growing up. I'm being very nervous and not willing to go and like talk to someone that I don't know. So this allows me to be able to do that.
Let's do this. These are all questions that Micah sent us around the same theme, which is our friendship. Let's tell, well, first I'll say this. We were interviewed by a blogger for Pathos, a large blogging platform, asking these kinds of questions.
That was a few months ago.
That was a few months ago. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. And so I'll put that link in the show notes so you can read more about that. That answers a lot of it. But let's do this. Let's just describe kind of how we became friends. Let's answer that question of Micah's, which is, how did you end up together? And
well, do you have an episode planned to tell us of the story of the courtship of your bromance with each other? I like the way that he phrased that.
That's great. Yeah. Let's do that.
So I think we've mentioned a little bit about how this happened.
Yeah.
So the bullet points here are that we worked together, and then there was, this is how I remember it. I recall that a co-friend of ours, Justin
Well, before
Bills,
that, I just remember being just like finding your personality enjoyable. Like I remember you brought in, you were teaching,
Yes.
you were training me in my new job. And you had this really nerdy t-shirt, which I think you still have.
Probably.
It was like a video game reference. But you always took the time to carefully consider questions that I had. And then at one point you brought in as a prop this giant old English literature encyclopedia.
It was great.
And I was like, this is great. I love this. And that actually, if our listeners are familiar with the first season banner image, we're both holding books. That's the book I'm holding, is that encyclopedia. Yeah. And then as we worked around each other, I remember times where I'd be sitting in the break room, looking at music, and he would ask for recommendations about what I was listening to. So there's that sense of like, this is someone who I enjoyed talking to and found interesting and found curious above all. And then we had that mutual friend.
That's right. Justin Bills.
Yeah.
And I remember overhearing you both saying that you were going to be watching a film. And I forget what the film was actually now at this point.
First one was To the Wonder by Terrence Malick.
You're right.
Yeah.
So you were going to sit down and watch this film by Terrence Malick.
Yeah.
And I overheard that and I was like, hey, I've seen a Terrence Malick film. It was all right. I should join you. We could have a discussion about it.
Yeah. And were you friends with Justin at that point?
I was.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I was much more close with Justin, I would say, at that point than I was with you.
Right. And so Justin had us over to his house, and Justin was doing ministry part-time while working part-time. He ended up doing ministry full-time. And he had us over to his house, and we watched this Terrence Malick film. And we ended up doing probably 5 or 6 films, maybe even more, 6 or 8. Just, once a month kind of thing, or every other week. And we go over to Justin's house. He has 3 little girls, and they'd run in, into the living room with the pajamas, and and then we have pizza. We'd have like snacks, and then the sun would set into the living room. I remember we'd sit around the living room, and we would just talk about these films. We started with Terrence Malick. We did the Before Trilogy, typical guy night movies.
Guy night movies.
Yeah, and then we did some of our favorite films of our own that we watched. I think we did Home Alone at one point.
Well, yeah. Ida, we did once, I believe. We watched that.
No, we did Of Gods and Men.
Thank you. Sorry,
yeah, Gods and Men. Yeah. We watched that comedy one that you liked.
Yes, Mighty Wind.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I love.
And then what was interesting about those conversations, I think part of it is that there was that mutual community. So we had food. There were kids around. Kind of what we talked about in this last season. There was a community taking place. We were in a living room. And so it was natural to have more personal conversations in that context, maybe more than just at a pub or going to a movie theater.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I remember is, especially when we watched the Before Trilogy, that each of those films brought up some memory of in our lives that I hadn't shared before. It was a story of a relationship that I had that I never shared with anyone else at that point. And it happened for each of us, kind of like clockwork. Yeah. So there was this sense of trust, a sense of openness. And that was kind of where we started.
Yeah, starting to reveal a lot about our past selves and about our inner workings a little bit that I really, really valued about having an outlet for that.
Yeah.
Really.
And I think that because Justin was a pastor,
He was able
And
to
he's-
facilitate the conversation really
Yeah, and it
easily.
wasn't any kind of formal ministry. This was just friends hanging out. But I think it just, and Justin's just a very open person, and it was really easy to bring up the faith element and discuss it openly, knowing our differences and working through that. So that was kind of how the friendship started. And then at that point, Kyle and I just kept doing that. We'd go to see movies together. And we just found that we were so fascinated by the worldview differences, and we enjoyed talking about it. Yeah. Anything else you want to add to that story?
No, although I'm looking for the next Before movie, if and when it ever actually
does
gets
happen,
made.
yeah, the
Because
fourth
we'll all
one.
three have to go to see
We
that
will,
movie on opening
definitely.
night.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's how it got started. So I think now if we go back to those questions, how would you recommend forming a friendship like you have without scaring people away? Well, I think it has to begin with
Invite them
mutual
over for
community.
beers and movies.
Yeah, literally.
Watch a Terrence Malick film. Just bro out.
Yeah. But I get, that sense of, but I think also, Kyle, I didn't know you were an atheist at the time.
Right.
Would that have scared me away? Maybe.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's this big topic. Did you know I was a Christian at the time?
I
Probably.
think so.
Okay.
You were not
Social
very,
media.
you didn't hide
Yeah.
that very
No, I
much
didn't. Yeah.
as far as being a Christian.
Yeah.
Did not know you had as many tattoos as you did, though. That was a shock. He does not have any tattoos.
Surprises everywhere.
Yeah.
So there wasn't that sense of label, I think. It was just friends. We were friends, and we found out we enjoyed similar kinds of discussions. And went from there, yeah.
I think really what it comes down to, I guess everyone's going to have a different ceiling to this, but I don't know if there's much of anything that any of my friends could tell me that would scare me away from being their friend, short of being like, I like to murder people on my off days. Maybe that would be something that would push me away.
Yeah.
But whether it's a different religion or I can't think of really anything that would throw
But I
me off.
remember when I was watching one of your YouTube videos, and I remember it happening twice when you came out as bisexual and when you said, hey, I'm an atheist in the videos. And it hurt each time, especially the atheist one, because my whole worldview is built around the God who loves and who's active. That's
Right.
so foreign, and there's so much baggage associated with the word.
Yeah.
So I'd say being friends first, get to know people as people.
Mm-hmm.
Then those labels, I think the hurt of hearing that word came up, and then I was like, yeah, but it's still Kyle. It's the same person.
Yeah.
This is, and
I think this is what gets into so much trouble now with whether or not you label yourself as either I'm a liberal or I'm a conservative, right? Because and I'm just as guilty of this as anyone else. But if someone was to say I'm 100, straight up, I am conservative, I would feel a little bit of a twinge and be like, oh, does that mean that he doesn't want me to live or all these other things?
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't.
Yeah,
There's
but there's
different
that association
variations
with it.
of conservative. I understand that. But I think that first statement would definitely send a bit of a chill into me until I dug a little deeper.
he also asked if how do you get to a place where you can talk honestly and cordially about worldview assumptions between a Christian and an atheist who work together? And I don't think we had that many discussions at work, just because that culture
it doesn't
didn't
really
encourage
allow
that.
for it.
Yeah, but I think having the work was important though, because we had a respect for each other.
We're all working towards the same goal.
Yeah, there's a community that takes place there.
So join Starfleet is what I'm trying to say.
But yeah, I guess if you're at work and you're getting to know people, I think what I loved about that working environment is you had so many different kinds of people from very different backgrounds. And because you didn't talk about it that much, but you saw people do something they love and you all cared about the same thing and you were all there because you were great people and you loved working with these people, that really that makes those conversations easier to begin with. It's not the only thing, because I definitely haven't had these conversations with all of those work friends.
Right,
You're the
right.
only one I'm still having these conversations with, but it was a
I think the big thing, and we've kind of already mentioned this, so we can say this again and move on.
Yeah.
It's not something that necessarily can happen right out of the gates if you're just starting a friendship with someone. I think it's, start with being friends first.
Yeah.
And then I would slowly start to build that into the relationship and then see where you go from there.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think it would be a very different situation just to be like, complete hypothetical here, but if we'd started this podcast and Daniel was like, no, I actually think that you should die, I think that your way of life means you should be stoned in the biblical way and that you should not be a living person anymore, that's a bit of a different kettle of fish that we'd have to combat with, rather than no, I want to learn more about you.
Yeah, there's that mutual place of curiosity and I think respect for each other person. I find you an interesting person and I admire your personality. And so of course I want to hear what you have to say about these things. And the more that I get to know you, the more I realize that. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
How about this one? Do your conversations in real life sound the same as your conversations on air?
I'd say they do.
Yeah, pretty much.
To a degree. I mean, I
We
think
only
we do,
speak when microphones are turned on, though.
but I
so
think,
it's-
I think we have more small talk and more just like personal lives
Right,
updates, right? And we actually talk a lot more about movies. I would say if you
That
were
is
to take
true.
our
Yeah.
conversation, it's a lot of it is just us talking about pop culture. But there are times where, we've had those discussions and I wish we'd recorded them because they were great. Because we will have these worldview discussions on there.
The last one I wanted to address is the very last question, which is, do we need to start a bi-worldview friendship app like Tinder, or can you help us figure out how to make friends in real life?
We just
So
did.
this is a great idea. We do need to make this app happen.
Do we though? Because doesn't that then put that label on top? Like, isn't that the exact opposite of what we've just been explaining, which is be friends first, then discover?
Yeah, I'm throwing all that out the window. I just want to keep swiping right and find the cutest Christian that doesn't want to have anything to do with me. Just in like in real life. I want to take the Tinder experience and bring it into my friendship experience, is what I'm trying to say.
Let's do it. Yeah. But no, I think, the other thing that I've noticed is,
Well, I think, sorry to interrupt you, but I was going to say, this is, I think, a recurring theme in so many areas of our life here nowadays, which is, I think there's a groundswell of people like, I need to get out of my bubble because I'm only interacting with people who are the same as me. And Fraser mentioned this in the very last episode we did about, only being inside of this one area all the time, right?
Yeah.
And having to like break free of that and not wanting to be just by himself and only hear his own worldview and ideas. He wants to be given different ideas so he can combat against that and really have a fully fledged life and friendships. Is that if you are noticing that, is like meetup.com is a great place to go to like you have interest, but it's probably going to be have a bunch of different people with different backgrounds coming into there.
Yeah.
Or
a good point.
I don't know, if you're considered, go to a farmer's market. I don't know what people do, but go to things that you may not necessarily have gone to in the first place. And I will guarantee that you're going to be given people that come into your life that are
and I
not
think there are
necessarily
certain
just like you.
contexts that encourage that more than others. Like,
Go to church.
well, but then that's like, then you're around people who are similar to you.
Right.
Like, I'm thinking of,
Go to synagogue.
that's not the point.
Okay, I know.
But it's having spaces that aren't just surrounded by your own community. It takes work. It's hard, but it's good. I also think that this is funny. I was thinking about working with people at the company we both work for, which remains unmentioned.
Although we mentioned it twice, but
we
yes.
have. But when we were there, we you had to know people as people doing what they do best, and all united. But then also you're following them on social media, so you get to know more about what they are and who they believe and about that. And it's just an interesting context I hadn't really been in before.
Right.
Where it's like, it's unique there. But yeah. Thanks, Micah, for those questions. Again, there's a great interview that we did that I will link to in the show notes that talk a lot more about those themes.
Well, that brings us literally now to the very end
Finally.
of our season 2. It's only gone on for so long.
Yeah.
But thank you for joining us here for this entire season 2.
Yeah.
As we've been mentioning, our season 3 is kind of a TBD at this point. We don't really know what it's going to be about.
Yeah. Or when it is. We just know we're going to do it.
We know it's going to be in a few months from now at bare minimum.
Yeah.
Maximum.
There's school.
It's
and
going to be next
relationships.
year. Let's put it that
That's
way.
right.
It's going to be
It'll
2019.
Yep. Let's do
However, we need to know what you want to see and listen to the most.
that. Yeah.
So
we're not doing this as a poll. We will make up our own minds.
right. But we
Just to be clear, but we want your ideas.
we do want your feedback, and if there's something that we really love, Daniel and I, then definitely we're going to pull that out and support that. So assumptionspod@gmail.com is a great place to send feedback and ideas to.
Yep.
But facebook.com/assumptionspod is a great place to go to give us feedback and stuff as well on this episode if you see it there. Those are probably going to be the two best places I think that you
Twitter
can
too.
Twitter that you can send us to. That's at AssumptionsPod as well. But we definitely want your feedback. Thank you for being so engaged in this in this season.
Yeah.
We had some pretty in-depth conversations, and I'm very, very thankful that we were able to delve as far as we could.
We have not got really any, maybe one or two iTunes reviews of this season. Put that in there too. If you have been listening to the season and enjoying it, throw us that review. It does help.
That or any other place that you're listening to podcasts on.
Yep.
So definitely you can leave Spotify reviews. You can leave Google Play reviews. There's however you're listening to this. If you can leave a review, it definitely helps us out in the search rankings for sure, which is really, really, really great.
But above all, thank you for listening and for being part of this journey with us. It has been a journey, and we wouldn't do it if people didn't listen. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
For more episodes, you can definitely go to assumptionspod.com to see all the episodes that we have there. Daniel, what is your website that people can follow you on?
DanielMelvillJones.com.
Great.
Yeah, and you
again, the best place to go and follow me is probably Twitter.
Yeah.
So I'm at the Kyle Marshall with 2 L's.
Yeah.
It feels sad. We're wrapping up.
I know, a little sad,
We have
but
nothing
it's been a
else to say.
blast. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in 2019.
Bye. Assumptions is produced by Kyle Marshall and Daniel Melvill Jones. This episode edited by Kyle Marshall. Our thumbnail was created by the always great Chris Taniguchi. Most of the music in this episode is from the band the Parson Red Heads. You can check out their music anywhere digital music is available. If you want a full rundown of the articles and media that were referenced, check out the show notes that Daniel puts together that are attached to this episode. It's always a brilliant document that he's able to put together. Thanks for listening to the credits. We'll be back again next year, I guess. Until that time, goodbye for now.